When we compare the Spanish of Spain to other Spanish-speaking countries, we find that this may not be the best way to divide up the Spanish-speaking world. And I'll show you why. Check out the following clip. Now I know that was a little fast, so let's slow it down a little bit. So we have in Spanish, es que siento que ellos deberían saber que vos sos famoso. Que vos sos famoso. And in English, I just feel that they should know that you are famous. Now here's another clip.
Todos los días venís a la radio.
So in Spanish we have todos los días venís a la radio. Todos los días venís a la radio. Do you come to the radio station every day? Now some of you with a bit of experience may have noticed that these two clips are Argentinian Spanish. They come from an Argentinian show on Netflix called Casi Feliz. Now from these clips we can see an interesting pattern that happens with the Spanish in Argentina. If we want to say you are famous in Spanish, then in Mexico we would say tú eres famoso. And in Spain we would say tú eres famoso. But in Argentina we would say vos sos famoso. Vos sos famoso. Then if we want to ask when are you coming, then in Mexico we would ask ¿cuándo vienes? And in Spain we would ask ¿cuándo vienes? But then in Argentina, we would ask, ¿cuándo venís? Now, as you can see from the opening examples, this question of Spain versus Latin America or Spain versus everyone else is a little more complex. Now, it makes sense geographically. Like if we draw a line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, it would probably be nice to say that the Spanish on this side of the line is a certain way and is different to the Spanish on this side of the line. But linguistically, when we study the sounds, vocabulary, and grammar of Spanish, it isn't necessarily the best way to divide up the Spanish-speaking world. So take a look at the following map. This shows the areas where we will find the voseo form. Now, voseo describes the verb conjugations that we looked at earlier from Argentina. Vos sos and vos venís. Now, dark blue is where we can find it in both spoken and written forms. And then the blue and light blue areas is where we will only find it in spoken form with varying levels of frequency with the tuteo form, where tuteo describes the conjugations that you may already be familiar with. Tú eres and tú vienes. In addition, the voseo conjugations between countries are not always the same. For example, we can find additional variations in countries such as Chile, Cuba, Panama, Colombia, and Venezuela. Now, I would imagine that there'll be some students out there watching that may ask, well, Andrew, what about vosotros? Well, yes, we also have the Vosotros form, which is another set of verb conjugations that we can find in the Spanish language. And we are most likely to find these conjugations in Spain, but not just Spain. As I mentioned, there are variations for the vos conjugations in places such as northeastern Colombia and western Venezuela, where the two countries meet along the border, as well as parts of Panama and southern Cuba, where it turns out that they use the same conjugations for vos in these areas as the vosotros in Spain. So for example, if you want to say you can in Spanish, then in Mexico and Spain, it would be tú puedes. And in Argentina, it would be vos podés. Then we have the vosotros form in Spain, which is this second person plural. You all can. Vosotros podéis. And then in these certain subregions in Latin America, we can find vos podéis. And so when students ask us, and we get this question a lot, do we teach the Spanish of Spain or Latin America real fast Spanish? And usually I simply just say that we have teachers in our school from Mexico and from Spain, so you have a choice, just to make it simple. But what I would really love to say is that we teach the tuteo form, which works in a large portion of Latin America and in Spain. And while Spain does have the vosotros form, the voseo form will have a much bigger impact on your conversations with the people in these regions of Latin America. This is because in a one-on-one conversation, you rarely need the you all form. But the you form, what are you doing, how are you going, is unavoidable. So if you specifically need to learn the voseo form because you need to learn about the Spanish of Chile or Argentina or some of these other subregions, then you'll need to do some extra research on that outside of class. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here and instead let's look at the sounds of the Spanish language. And again, we can ask the question, does this separation of Spain versus the rest of the Spanish-speaking world make sense for pronunciation? Well, probably the other most well-known part of this question, in addition to vosotros, is the TH sound associated with the letters C and Z in Spain. Now, as a quick aside, one of the biggest urban legends that persists is this idea that this sound came from a king in Spain that had a lisp many centuries ago. Now, this is definitely a myth because it doesn't make sense since a frontal TH lisp would occur on the letter S as well, but this doesn't happen with the phonology of the Spanish of Spain. So for example, when asking the question in Mexico, what are you saying? We would say, ¿Qué dices? ¿Qué dices? But in Spain, they would ask, ¿Qué dices? ¿Qué dices? ¿Qué dices? And then in Mexico, what are you doing? They would ask, ¿Qué haces? And in Spain, they would ask, ¿Qué haces? ¿Qué haces?
¿Qué haces?
Now, if someone had a frontal TH lisp, they wouldn't say dices or haces, they would say dices or haces, which is a problem for our king with the lisp theory. Now, while we can only find this TH sound in Spain, it doesn't occur throughout all of Spain. In parts of Andalusia and the Canary Islands, we can find natives that will pronounce their C's and their Z's like the rest of the Spanish-speaking world. In fact, I did a podcast with a good friend of mine from the Canary Islands, and we spoke about this very topic. I'll leave a link below if you want to go and listen to that. But here is a quick clip so you can hear a little of that accent.
En Canarias tenemos un acento diferente del resto de España,
Sí.
que es el ceseo, que pronunciamos las C y las Z como si fueran S.
Mm-hmm.
Y también tenemos un acento peculiar porque nos comemos a veces las S finales y ese tipo de cosas. Y el léxico es igual, excepto que hay algunas palabras que son características de mi comunidad autónoma, que solo se dicen en Canarias.
Okay, so our line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean doesn't work for this sound, but instead it might be better to draw it through parts of Andalusia and around the Canary Islands as follows. Now, are there additional sounds that occur in other parts of the Spanish-speaking world? And the answer is yes. We have another sound that occurs with Y's and double L's. Now, in most Spanish-speaking regions, the letter Y and the double L have a sound which is very similar to the Y in, say, you or your from English, but with just a bit more gravel, like a bit more friction. The technical term is fricative. So instead of you. Instead of your. So for example, in Spanish, she is arriving soon. Ella llega pronto. Ella llega pronto. Now in Rio Platense Spanish, we can find a version of these phonemes which sounds like an SH sound in English. So check out the following clip.
Yo ya tengo mellizos, pero ella está embarazada de mellizos otra vez.
Okay, and I'm almost loath to do this one in Spanish because it's a bit of a tongue twister. Yo ya tengo mellizos, pero ella está embarazada de mellizos otra vez. So in English, I have twins, but she is pregnant with twins again. Now, here I would actually prefer the pronunciation of, say, Spain or Mexico because it just removes that almost she has seashells type problem. So mellizos in Spain, and that additional TH almost makes this word easier, but I digress. So this SH sound occurs around the basin of El Rio de la Plata, and it's why the Spanish in this region is known as Rio Platense Spanish, which includes a large portion of Argentina and Uruguay. All right, now let's switch gears again. The last area where we can talk about the differences between, say, Spain and Latin America is vocabulary. And this is the hardest part of the language to talk about in terms of regional patterns. In general, similar to the English-speaking world, Spanish vocabulary falls into the categories of very universal or very local. So for example, common Spanish vocabulary such as all of the most common verbs, say ser, estar, tener, haber, ir, poder, hacer, dar, pasar, etc., these all carry the same meanings throughout the Spanish-speaking world. But then there are words and phrases that may only be used in one country or one sub-region. Now, as a couple of quick examples, the word for bus varies wildly throughout the Spanish-speaking world. So in Argentina, we'd have colectivo. Bolivia, flota, autocar o colectivo. Chile, liebre o bus. Colombia, autobús o buseta. Costa Rica, chivilla. Cuba, guagua. They also say this in the Canary Islands. And Dominican Republic, they also say guagua or bus. Ecuador, buseta. Guatemala, camioneta o micro. Honduras, rapidito. México, camión. Nicaragua, camioneta. Perú, ómnibus. Combi. Venezuela, camionetica or buseta. Now, this is far from an exhaustive list. Maybe you know some more words that describe a bus in other Spanish-speaking countries not on this list. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any more. So, As you can see, this choice of, say, Spain versus Latin America is more complex than the way it gets marketed and mostly spoken about. As you've seen, we have tuteo versus voseo, which is a more impactful choice than, say, the use of vosotros in Spain. And while we have the TH sound of Spain, we also have the SH sound of Rioplatense Spanish. So as a student of Spanish, how should you approach these differences? Well, just like the English-speaking world, while there is a lot of variation in terms of sounds, vocabulary, and grammar, think about the English of the UK versus Scotland versus South Africa, the US, or Australia. I call it the dinner party test. If we organized a dinner party and we took a native from every English-speaking country and put them around a dinner table, they would have no problems conversing and having a really fun evening. There would be the odd word that would come up and people would say, really, you use that word for that? But then apart from, say, that and some really strong accents from, say, maybe Ireland or Scotland, everyone would be able to understand each other without any issues. So it's the same for the Spanish-speaking world. Apart from the odd word here and there, like autobús, or the countries where they have the strongest accents, the majority of the Spanish-speaking world understands one another without issue. So my recommendation for Spanish beginners and intermediate students would be to pick one sound variation that we spoke about today. Either the S sound associated with C's and Z's of Mexico, or the TH sound of Spain, and the gravelly Y sound associated with the Y and the double L of, say, Mexico or Spain, and then the SH sound of, say, Rioplatense Spanish, and then practice with those. Then consider if you need the tuteo, voseo, or vosotros forms. Then when you get to an advanced level, you'll be able to take the Spanish that you developed, say, from another region, and you'll be able to use it and understand the people of where you're traveling to. If you have achieved an advanced level, you likely won't have any issues communicating with the natives there. You'll then be able to start picking up on, say, the local vocabulary, phrases, and expressions when you're there. Okay, if you enjoyed this lesson, then please like and subscribe if you're not already, and share the video with someone you think would get value from it. And then leave any questions or comments or suggestions for upcoming videos you have in the comment section below. Okay, until next time, habla mejor, entiende más.